Yo, what's going on guys, it's Kryptic TMG and I'm back with a brand new video, and here we are for round 2 of the AOR GT3 Elite Championship Season 10, and we're at Ruapuna Park, which is a pretty tricky track, but a track that I felt quite confident with. The qualifying would be in the dry and the race would be in the wet, so it was going to be pretty tricky. I was as confident as I could be going into a wet race. Obviously there's so many variables when you practice. The conditions are never the same twice, so you can practice for as much as you want, but you're never guaranteed to get the exact same conditions when you get into the race. So that was always in the back of my mind, and also in the back of my mind when I made this setup for the car. So the race was sort of set to go overcast sort of halfway through, but we were noticing that the track was staying wet for the whole race, but sometimes the track would dry out 20 minutes before the end, so it was pretty tricky. But here's my best qualifying lap, and I'll see you after it. So we set a 17.8, which was pretty average to be honest. In practice the fastest I actually managed was a 17.0, so well off the pace of what we could do. Even the first sector was pretty bad, the middle sector wasn't great either, but somehow managed to get pole. So yeah, I was a bit surprised at the time. I thought I definitely messed it up, but yeah, of course managed to get pole position, which is obviously in a wet race is the best place to start. I had CJ behind me on the grid, so someone who I race pretty often, so pretty much just trying to focus on getting a clean start and seeing how we go. Switch the fuel to lean just to save fuel, but obviously in the wet you're probably going to use less fuel anyway. But coming across the line, the acceleration zone for this race was really short. It was pretty much the start of the flags, or he's still on the left hand side, to the line, which wasn't that long at all. So yeah, just had to sort of judge it at the right time, and CJ sort of hung back a little bit. I was expecting him to be right next to me, but he actually hung back at the start, which kind of made it a little bit easy to get the jump. But at the start of the race, really tentative into the first corner, because I just know the grip levels could be anything when you start the race, and I could already feel the understeer, and I had done something to my car to sort of save the tyres for the second half of the race, because the wet tyres were sort of wearing pretty quickly. So I'd really opened up my brake ducts, and you can see that my rear brakes are just not getting warm, and to be honest, throughout the duration of the whole race it doesn't change, they just do not get warm. You see, as I go to brake for that corner, I'm super slow into the corner, and I still just go straight on. You can see CG almost gets past us, and every time we're having to brake really early, because the brakes are just seriously not warming up. So difficult start. I was expecting the car to get better after a few laps, so it was just about trying to hang on and make sure I can hold my position, not make a mistake. But it was so treacherous on braking. I hadn't felt it like this in practice at all, and I just seemed to just be braking too late everywhere, when in fact I was braking where I was braking before, but it just wasn't slowing down in time. You can see the rear tires is super the rear brakes is super cold. And even if you look at the tyres are already starting to go down, so I knew it would be tricky to keep the tyres in. So that was my thinking in making the brake ducts so open. I think they were about 90 on the rears, and I think I had 75 or 80 on the front or something like that. And yeah, the brakes I didn't want the brakes to heat the tyres up, even though at the beginning you probably want your tyres to be sort of hot, so you've got a lot of grip. But I thought it would you know, cost me time at the end of the race, because I didn't know for certain whether the track would dry up right at the end or dry up 20 minutes before the end. And if it did dry up before the end, then if your tyres are too hot, you'll be in trouble. But you see, we tried to get it stopped here, the car just slides and we end up running really wide. CJ gets past us, we got Archil on our left hand side as well, and I just knew I couldn't brake late, so I had to brake early. Archil goes around the outside, pretty nice move. And yeah, from first to third in sort of one to two corners, and yeah, it was very tricky at the start. The car was pretty difficult to drive, but I knew I just had to hang in there, because my pace in practice definitely sort of went from slower to faster rather from fast to slow, if you know what I mean. The setup was definitely not set for sort of the beginning of the race, it was more middle to end. So all I had to do was just stick with these guys at the front, try not to make any mistakes, which is easier said than done. But not knowing if there's going to be any puddles. In practice, when we did this track, there were so many puddles in random places, it was crazy. So I was a bit skeptical of where the puddles were. As you can see, Ollie gets to running us in the Porsche. That Porsche really fast in the straight line. Even when you put a lot of downforce on the Porsche, it's a very quick car in a straight line. So I knew I had to get a good run out of the last corner to keep Ollie behind, especially at the time where I was struggling. But as you see now, move forward to lap 5 and start to pick the pace up, and we've got about a two and a half gap to the leaders, almost 3 seconds to the leaders, and now the pace is starting to come to me a little bit more, and yeah, feeling a lot more comfortable. Managed to pull out a gap on Ollie and trying to push forward and get back to where we were, but it's so hard to drive when you're stuck right behind someone with a face full of spray. That for me is probably the most beneficial thing in a race like this, when you use like the roof cam and stuff like that. As Archil gets past CJ, I think CJ goes a little bit too wide at the hairpin. But yeah, when you use roof cam and you're stuck behind someone, you still have quite a lot of vision, you can still see a lot of the track, but when you're in car and you're right behind someone, you really can't see. So that's one of the best things about starting on pole. I didn't really have to sit in anyone's spray off the start, because it can be very difficult. So yeah, but onto we are at the moment, lap 6, and you can see the guys in front battling nose to tail. Archil looks like he had the pace, but CJ's managed to pick his pace up and stick right on the back of him. So we're in third place and just trying to gap the guys behind us and try and keep up with this front battle, and just see what we can do when it comes to the pit stops, because I knew that our pace was going to be pretty similar during the race. So it was pretty much all about who makes less mistakes and who can have a good pit stop and a good pit strategy. For me, I knew that if I went behind, I would probably be looking to undercut somebody, and if I was in front, I'd probably try and stay out as long as I can so I don't come out in traffic. That's pretty much the thinking of the strategies at the moment. But you can see we're still up on our times in a minute. We're starting to claw back some times to the guys in front, and yeah, the car was starting to come to me and starting to feel pretty good. But it was just this hairpin. This just didn't want to slow down, and it was weird because that hairpin in practice was probably one of my strongest corners where I used to gain so much time, but I seemed to be a lot slower through the middle sector than I was in practice, just because I just couldn't slow the car down. But yeah, maybe I should have ran with smaller brake ducts, and I probably would have had a little bit more grip and a little bit more braking power at this part of the race, which I was definitely missing. But still in third place, still in a decent position. Obviously not in the position that we started, which would have been a lot better if we could have held that first place. But still, as long as we can keep in contact with the guys in front, then I'd be happy just to wait it out to the pit stops and see when people pit and stuff like that. So very interested in what these pit stops have added to the league racing now. But moving forward onto lap 8, and again we skip forward to the end of lap 8 onto lap 9. And you can see we've actually closed the gap down, opened out quite a big gap behind us, and going to the first corner, just brake a little too late, get on the grass, half spin, and yeah, you can see we lose all the time we gained again. and that was sort of the feature of me just trying to get the car slowed down in the early part of the race. Was really tough. But we got Ollie on the back of us now. We lost almost 2.6 seconds on that last lap, and now we have sort of the pressure from behind. I think it was Ollie and Infinity behind us, trying to stick with us at the minute. And now I was just thinking, great, I've got to make up that whole gap again of what I managed to catch back up. But again, we're up on our lap, and we go braking into the hairpin, and we just go too deep this time. Get on the grass again, and it spins us just like a half spin, and we've made Ollie and Infinity catch right up to the back of us now. So just losing time through silly mistakes at the minute. But it just seemed, I don't know, I didn't feel like I was braking too late. I was pretty much braking when I was braking practice, but it just would not slow down for whatever reason. And it was sort of catching me off guard with how long it was taking the car to slow down. So yeah, it was a weird one. I did practice it before the race, and it was perfectly fine. And then it come to the race, and I was just I could not get the car stopped. And I didn't want to hit the brakes any harder, because I ended up just locking up and going off even further. So it was very tricky, and now I'm thinking, right, I'm actually going to have to start pushing, because these guys in front of me are going to get a big enough gap that they're going to be able to cover me at the pit stops, whatever I do. So right now I'm just thinking, I need to get away. I need to start pushing. I need to get right back on the back of them. But at the same time, it's very hard to push when you don't have confidence in the car. And again, you hit the brakes, and just car just doesn't slow down. And this time we've properly gone off now. Lost 2 more positions. I think Infinity actually went off as well, but he didn't go off the track as far as I did. So you can see how much time we've lost there. We're now almost 10 seconds behind the leaders now. So from being in the lead to now dropping back to 10 seconds, it was not a great start, but our pace was still good. When we could actually complete a lap, our pace still felt pretty fast. So it was definitely a weird one. I could be fast, but I just kept making the mistakes, and I felt like I had sort of definitely pace to challenge the guys at the front, but I just could not stop making mistakes. You see, again, we got into that corner too deep, and it's like, it's just a real struggle to get it slowed down. And even when I thought I'd brake early, it was like it's like the car just, it wouldn't even gear down. I'd be in 3rd gear trying to get it down to 2nd, it would just stay in 3rd and just wouldn't slow down. It was crazy. But you can see CJ on the other side of the track there, quite far ahead at this point, about 9.5 seconds at the minute, and 13 laps in the race, already a 9.5 second gap. I was behind the leader, and obviously CJ winning the first race of the season, looking to extend his championship lead. So I had to get sort of a good result after what happened to me at the last race, where probably should have had a podium but for my wheel malfunctioning on the last lap, and I was really nervous about that happening again. So before the race, I made sure that I switched up our PlayStation just before the race, switched it back on, and loaded up everything again, just to give it like the wheel a fresh start, hoping that it worked. So that's sort of what I got to resort to. I think if I have any more wheel glitches, it's just time to look at a new wheel, maybe. But I've got so much bits for the Thrustmaster, I don't want to just get rid, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, I don't want to be spending £800, £900 in the fan and check, because I just think that's a joke. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully I don't get any more of these bugs, as we get a corner cut penalty, and then we actually go off the circuit again. So we've lost even more time now. So yeah, that really was, that and turn 1 really were corners we struggled with massively. And I was just so used to my braking point in the rain in practice that it was so hard for me to get out of it when the race started, because I would have been braking so much earlier than what I was in practice, and I just couldn't understand. I was like, I know the brakes are not super hot, but surely the car shouldn't be just skating off the track every 5 minutes. But now I just sort of put myself in a really bad position, because I was well behind. It was just one of them races, man, where it started off so well, but it all seemed to be going wrong, and I was sort of 5th place, kind of getting detached from third and fourth. We're fully detached from the leaders, 11.5 seconds behind. So yeah, it was all about just trying to get that gap down. You see, we managed to close about a second, then it'll go back up and it'll go back down. But I just thought I'm just gonna keep pushing. I'm just gonna keep pushing. And you can see we managed to catch back up to Infinity, who's managed to catch up to the back of Ollie D. So at this stage in the race, if you look at our gap to the leaders, we are actually catching the leaders. CJ out front's pace hasn't been spectacular, so we're actually kind of reining the leaders back in. And I thought, oh, I'd love to have free air right now, because I felt like I'd get to the back of someone and there was just nothing you could do to get past, nothing you could do. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. But just to tell you, like, that the conditions are always different. In practice, when we did our practice races with the exact same conditions, straight off of the back, straight on the sort of first few laps, we were already doing low 24s and 24.1s and stuff like that. And in the race, you can see we're sort of in the high 25s and low 26s. So it's funny how it can change from one session to the other, and you're never guaranteed to get the same weather conditions twice, which it makes it important to practice, but you kind of got to be ready for anything. So yeah, it's pretty difficult, but it is something that I do like about this game, which the element of surprise when you go into a race. I do actually prefer the conditions in the rain. Apologies as well, I actually pitted in at the end of lap 20, I believe it was, and I didn't manage to record the pit stop because for some reason the race was a lot longer than an hour, so I missed it by a few laps. So by this stage I've already pitted, so that's why you see I've got the clear air in front of me, and I'm just pushing now. I'm pushing to jump Ollie. I managed to jump Infinity, who I think hit the wall in the pit lane. So you can see lap 29, we've come out just behind Archil, and Archil was right behind CJ when he went into the pits. Archil was right behind CJ when we were sort of trying to catch up to the back of Infinity and Ollie D. We were about 7-8 seconds behind him at the time, and after I pitted early, I've come out right behind the guy that was in second place. So I feel like I've done quite a good job to jump the guys in front, and I was hoping that I could have jumped Archil, but he pitted right at the right time, and at this time I knew CJ would definitely react to Archil pitting, because Archil seemed to have quite a lot of pace, and CJ obviously needed to have his car in front of him to slow him down. So I knew CJ would respond, as he has done in the pits in the moment. Ollie D comes into the pits, and I'm just pushing on, trying to get to the back of Archil and seeing if I could jump Ollie D possibly. It was going to be pretty tight because I was maybe about 2 seconds behind just before I pitted, because I had Infinity between me and Ollie. So it was going to be tight, but I didn't have a great outlap. But luckily, I think these guys stayed out a few laps later, which made it easier for me to make the difference with clear air. You see Ollie D's coming out the pits, I'm coming down the straight, and we managed to go past him. Obviously we just carried the momentum that we had going through the corner, and CJ just comes out ahead of Archil. We just couldn't do enough to get ahead of him. And now the race is pretty much on. It was going to be difficult to pass. We knew that. We're all in the same car as well. As we come through this left-hander, we just hit the puddle at the wrong angle. It spits us off the track. Very lucky not to spin. That knocks us down back into 4th place, and all the hard work from the undercut has sort of been undone. And knowing how with this track, it was pretty, unless you had a massive speed advantage, it was pretty hard to overtake. Unless you're lapping sort of a second and a half quicker than somebody, it was pretty hard to overtake, I think, around here. It was very hard to get on the throttle when you're right behind someone, because you don't know if they can get on the throttle as early. So you don't want to be T-boning and pushing anybody off. But you can see after I run through the puddle, I just switch on traction control, like, yep, I'm going to need that traction on low at least, because it's crazy. I probably didn't show you how many times I went through that puddle and how many times I was so close to that actually happening, but I just try to just hold on to the wheel and just get through them. Eventually it caught me out, but You know, it's one of them things. I still thought, well, I'm not that far off the lead at the minute, and any mistakes in front of us we can definitely capitalise on. So the race wasn't lost, but I did, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, man, I wish I hadn't made that mistake at the beginning, because I could have had a lead by now, and I felt like my pace was definitely enough to be race winning pace, especially if I was able to get clear air. But it just didn't work out. As I said, in the rain it can be very tricky, just where the puddles are placed. That puddle on the exit of that fast left-hander is placed in a very difficult position, very difficult, because you want to use the curb on the outside, but you know you've got half a puddle on the curb. If you get that at the wrong angle, it will just spit you straight off like it did to me, or worse. So yeah, pretty damn tricky. But lap 31, we're still pushing on. You can see all the top four in the same shot. CJ still holding off Archer. Archer still looking for a way past CJ, despite the fact he pitted 1 lap earlier and would have had that, would have had fresh air to sort of pump the laps in. But CJ responded so quick, he didn't let Archer build up anything. So yeah, it's one of them things. But for me now, I was just looking at the tyres thinking the tyres will last, so let's just see what we can do ahead of us, because at the moment you can see the gaps opened up, and for me it was like when I would get right behind someone, I just losing downforce all the time. I could get close. I felt like I was, even with my brakes being cold, I felt like I was gaining so much time in the hairpin that it was crazy. I felt I was gaining a lot of time going to this corner right here, but I still could brake pretty late. But for whatever reason, at the start of the race, must have just been the brake temperatures. The brakes just felt like they weren't at the races, they just weren't working. So it was very tough, very tough race, but very enjoyable at the same time. Yeah, at this time I'm thinking, wow, any of the top 4 can win this race, especially if anyone makes a mistake, if anyone has a come together, then it really is just race on. But obviously my goal was to get to the back of that group ahead. You can see Archer still following CJ around everywhere, but the problem Archer's had so far is every time, or everywhere he was a lot faster, he'd just spin and end up losing time. Sort of the same thing I was doing. Anytime I was sort of on pace or catching, I would just make a mistake which would drop me back even further, which was very annoying. So yeah, it's just one of them things. But we had to keep on pushing just in case anyone in front of us made a mistake. 10 laps to go, so we haven't really got too many laps. The laps are going pretty quickly. The race, to be honest, had gone quite quickly. Even though we was in the rain and we was going slower, the race just seemed to fly past. Obviously quite a short lap at Ruapuna, even in the wet. So yeah, it was just the race was going past so quickly, and we seemed to be tight for the majority of the race. It seems that I was in sort of behind someone for the majority of this race. You can see as we get to the hairpin again how close the top 4 were. So yeah, it was crazy. Knowing that, I felt like I had to pace definitely to win the race, but I just could not get past. I couldn't even get close, to be honest, to the back of Ollie, because every time I did, the front end of the car just seemed to just go missing, which is something that I've suffered previously before in the Audi and in the Renault. When you get really close behind someone, the front end seems to just wash away a little bit for me. Because of my driving style, I'm probably very sensitive to change, so when I feel the car sort of different from what I'm used to, it tends to put me off quite a bit. The only car I've ever driven, any GT3 car I've driven where it was able to get right up behind other cars and still feel the same, was the Z4, which was pretty good. But anyway, still, as you can see, if you look at our rear brake temps, even now, towards the end of the race, our rear brakes still are pretty much too cold. And yeah, we're still not able to get the correct temperatures into the brakes, which I feel like was definitely costing me time in the braking zones, because I was having to be a lot more tentative than what I wanted to be. So I think I went a little bit too safe on the brake ducts, but it's something I'll learn for next time. But we at least know that we managed to keep our tyres in a good range, so I think if we just went a little bit low on the brake ducts and maybe got a bit more temperature into the brakes, then we wouldn't have had so many issues. But at the same time, our tyres were still in pretty good nick, to be honest. You can see even with traction control and some of the puddles still pretty lethal, and it's really dangerous going through the puddles. But you see there, Archer spins out and he managed to get up into 3rd position, and it have a random spin there. I don't know whether he hit a puddle. He already seemed to be in the corner, and he wasn't I don't think he was at the point of the corner where you're getting on a power. So I'm pretty sure maybe he must have touched a puddle in the inside maybe, and it just sort of car aquaplanes and just throws you off. Literally, when you hit a puddle at the wrong angle, there's pretty much nothing you can do. You're gonna spin. So yeah. And for me, like, after I hit that puddle that threw me off and I put traction control on, it was definitely a lot safer going through the puddle. The car wouldn't snap as much, but it definitely does. Traction control for me definitely slows you down. I can't, it's just weird. It's like it bogs you down so much that it just, I don't know, like whenever I've used traction control, especially in the rain when we tried it last season at Red Bull Ring in practice, in the rain it was just so much slower to use traction control. But I get why people would use it, especially if your setup isn't rear end friendly, whereas you're getting a lot of wheel spin on power. Then I get why people would use it. Me having to switch to it for this race because of that puddle, I just didn't want to make any mistakes, or any more mistakes than I had already made. But it definitely does slow you down. I can feel the traction control working, but I mean, in this case, I just wanted to be safe for the rest of the race because I've thrown away so much time during this race, and now you can see us with 5 laps to go. We're sort of, I think we're a lot further back than what we should be. I definitely think that we'll be fighting CJ for the win at this point. But obviously, if you make mistakes, as Jam has come into the pit lane, you can see Jam's coming out of the pit lane now. He's done really well because he was quite a way behind us. You can see he's only probably going to be about 5 or so seconds. So him staying out really long, playing the long game, must have had some decent pace. He's managed to sort of get himself kind of in the mix, 5th place behind Archer. And yeah, Jam did a pretty good job. Managed to stay out all that time, pitting 5 laps before the end. And at some stage in this race, he must have had some decent pace. Because I'm not sure, he wasn't too close to me at any other stage, so he's probably lapping pretty quickly. But as I said, we've been promoted up into 3rd, and now it's all about seeing whether we can sort of pressure Ollie into a mistake at the minute. Definitely at this point we're quicker, but there's just nowhere to pass on this track, and it's sort of a risk anyway in the rain to sort of make aggressive passing overtaking maneuvers, because if you get it wrong then you risk just completely wiping somebody out. And after the race I had, that's the last thing I needed, was another incident late on. And also after the first race, the last thing I needed was to have another sort of messy end to a race. So it was pretty much seeing what I could do, how close I could get. But I noticed pretty much earlier on in the race how much of a straight line speed advantage the Porsche had. So I knew I'm going to have to literally get out the last corner, literally right on his tail, to see if I can sit in the slipstream, and even then out-braking people into corners. At how the car was, I wasn't too confident of that either. So it was pretty much just going to see whether we could pressure them into a mistake. Normally, if I was sort of in an online race, or I'm just messing around with my friends or whatever, then you get right up behind and you just continuously flash the lights trying to put them off. But obviously in AOR that's not allowed, even though we do see a lot of that in real life GT3 racing and stuff like that. But as you can see, he's sort of always on that power that little bit earlier, so it's very hard to sort of get right to the back of him. But there was just nothing I could do. I was quicker, but there was just could not get past. And he wasn't making any mistakes, so it's really hard to like sort of stick right onto the back of someone. But you can see that I actually turned in slightly on the grass there, and if I hadn't straightened up the wheel I would end up spinning it. So again, another small mistake. Ollie's managed to create a little bit of a gap. I knew we had the pace. It just we didn't have the space to use it. So yeah, it was just one of them races. And you see me going towards the left hand side of the track because I'm thinking that the track may be just drying up a little bit. So I would keep trying to keep my tyres cool, and just sort of making sure that my tyres don't burn out or my tyres don't overheat before the end. But it will become really sort of tricky to drive on because obviously when the wet tyres start to heat up, when the track starts to dry up, then obviously your wet tyres are going to suffer a lot more. And I could tell it was drying up because you could literally brake a lot later into the hairpin. Even with my brake ducts how they were, you could definitely brake a lot later into the hairpin. You can see we're up on our time at the minute. And that's pretty much, I think everyone at this stage of the race is probably up on their time, but it literally is, I can feel all the grip coming towards the car, and this is sort of the time in the race where I wanted to have free air because this is when I feel like I could really push. But yeah, it was just pretty much nowhere for me to go at this time. I would have loved if at the pit stops, if Archer and CJ had just stayed out that few laps longer, I'd have been able to make the difference. But Archer pitted just at the right time, obviously coming out sort of like a second in front of me, and then CJ responding to Archer, which put him sort of right in front of Archer after the pit stop, and kind of halted our progress. We tried to sort of catch them unaware by pitting early, and obviously on this game you can see the 4 cars that are directly behind you, but you can't see any more than that. So if they're in first place and I'm in like 6th or 7th, they can't actually see my progress. They can't see the gap that I'm managing to close down. But the moment I get within them 4 positions behind, then they can now see sort of what times I'm getting. They can sort of judge the gap, so you sort of know when to pit if someone's sort of closing the pit stop on you. But you see Archer at the minute, he's sort of closing down on me. I'm closing down on Ollie again. CJ has picked up his pace and is actually pulling away now. Only a lap to go, and it's getting very close again. This was the section towards the end of the lap where I definitely felt like I had more pace. But again, as I said, Ollie wasn't making any mistakes, and he was getting on the power soon enough. So it was just it was frustrating, but it was, at the end of the day, it was a very good race. Very good race. So many different people involved, and you can see I actually sort of catch the puddle on the outside. It almost spins us towards the inside of the track again. Ollie goes a little bit wide, but he manages to sort of cut me off at the midpoint of the corner and stamp on the power, and he pulls away. Archer actually makes another mistake, and that allows Jam into 4th position now. So he's had a great comeback drive from, I'm not sure where he started, but he managed to come up the field. You see we touched the white line, and that is pretty much our attempt to get 2nd place gone, because we almost end up spinning that turn 1 again. So that was really close. The thing is with this game is it's not hard to catch the car, but you have to sort of notice that you're in a tricky position very early on. If you can feel the fact the car's about to snap, you sort of got to counter steer into it before it actually happens. If you leave it too long, then it becomes a problem trying to catch the car. And I had quite a few half spins in this race, but most of the time I managed to catch it just before the back end completely went round. And obviously if you spin all the way around, you're just going to lose loads of time, probably going to stall the engine and have to start up again. So yeah, last lap of the race, CJ's managed to pull away, and the race finished sort of with a bigger gap than what it had been through for most of the race. So yeah, it was very interesting at the end of the race. Very interesting to see. I see we go deep at the last corner again, trying to brake super late, but the jig was up. There wasn't really much I could do. Pretty much our position was pretty much down to the errors that we made earlier on in the race, and we managed to get a podium position, which we probably should have got in the last race. So yeah, I was a little disappointed with the fact that I made all them mistakes, man, and that was pretty much it. But we still managed to sort of come back through, and yeah, 3rd position. But next race is at Indianapolis, where it's reverse grid, so watch out for that one. Anyway, it's Kryptic TMG. Like and subscribe, hit the notification bell to catch my videos first, and peace.